Here in Washington, a busy day. We'll get to a closer look at the first reparations hearing on Capitol Hill in more than a decade, and it's World Refugee Week. We're out at some restaurants here in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, that are paying it forward to the millions of refugees around the world on this day. But first, some breaking headlines today, starting with big news out of the EPA today. A major rollback of coal-fired power plant regulations and their pollution. The Trump administration just a little while ago ended a requirement that the plants make efficiency upgrades, saying coal remains essential in this country. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the move, quote, outrageous, dirty power scam that will endanger hundreds of lives and lead to greater greenhouse gas emissions. Well, over on Capitol Hill, President Trump's former longtime advisor Hope Hicks is refusing to answer questions today about her time inside the White House. House Democrats are interviewing Hicks as part of their investigation into the president's alleged obstruction of justice in the Russia investigation. The president tweeted all of this as, quote, extreme presidential harassment and instructed Hicks not to answer any of their questions. Frustrated Democrats on the committee tell us blanket executive privilege does not apply to her. And finally, the president's big plans for the 4th of July have been unveiled now. It includes a speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and some additional fireworks here in the nation's capital. The event is being dubbed Salute to America, includes music, military demonstrations, and flyovers, including one by, yes, you see it, Air Force One. That'll be a first. Critics are saying the president risks politicizing the national holiday. Well, if you caught any of President Trump's big re-election kickoff in Florida last night, you might have thought you were watching a campaign rally from 2015. The president went on the attack against Hillary Clinton, talked about her emails, of course, led chants about the border wall. This is all part of a big kickoff planned by the president now as he surges into campaign season. And our political director, Rick Klein, is here. Rick, it was sort of deja vu, it felt like last night. What was your big takeaway from this?
He's still running against Hillary Clinton. The chants, the feel, the look, it felt very much like 2016. Also striking, because you can't say it enough, this president is setting up very, very strong straw men in what he's jousting against, talking about Democrats as un-American, as being against your way of life, trying to dismantle the Constitution.
Why not run on your record? The president's got some pretty good accomplishments. The economy, case in point. Didn't hear a lot about that last night.
Yeah, he will run on that, but I think what you realize is that for him, the politics of grievance are front and center. And even when he's on the inside, he has to run against those on the inside. So there was a lot of talk about draining the swamp and beating the system and how the system is essentially rigged. All of that was back. It's an intriguing twist, and I think he was trying to draw his supporters into that by saying, look, these Democrats are trying to take away what we have accomplished. So he is looking forward a little bit, but man, there's a lot of relitigation in 2016.
Relitigating immigration as well, a top campaign issue in 2016. In the first part of his presidency, he was whipping up the crowd on illegal immigration hours after tweeting plans that he's going to send out ICE to deport millions.
We are making progress like nobody would believe. Wait till you see some of the things that you're going to be hearing about over the next 2 months. We believe our country should be a sanctuary for law-abiding citizens, not for criminal aliens. And we will always support and protect the heroes of ICE, Border Patrol, and law enforcement generally throughout our country. Thank you.
So that deportation threat had a lot of people talking yesterday. And for more on this, I want to bring in our former DHS official, ABC News contributor John Cohen, who joins us on the phone. John, wanted to ask you about the impact that the president's threat of mass deportations is having, and whether it makes law enforcement easier, more difficult, no difference by the president making these claims.
Yeah, hey guys, there's so much to unpack there just through the two statements that you ran. The law enforcement officials that I've been speaking with over the last 48 hours are concerned on several fronts. First, this is clearly an effort to use law enforcement operations to advance political objectives, and that's something that always makes law enforcement professionals uncomfortable. Secondly, it's highly unrealistic that we are actually going to see an effort to round up 1 million people. The resources that would require just aren't present in the federal government. That said, we probably are going to see some type of aggressive action. And what has law enforcement concerned about that is that, first, we hear from the Secretary of Homeland Security that they already don't have space in detention facilities. They've asked for an emergency appropriations to expand the space simply because of the surge of people at the border. So where are they going to put people that they round up through this interior enforcement? Also, to conduct this type of operation, they're going to have to pull ICE personnel and other law enforcement personnel from other responsibilities, many of which are dealing with much higher risk issues. So they're going to be pulling people off joint terrorism task forces. They're going to have to be pulling investigators away from investigating the transfer of sensitive technologies to countries like North Korea and Iran. They're going to have to pull investigators off of gang task forces to not go after criminals, but to go after people, many of which are non-criminal aliens who are subject to deportation, but have been here for a long period of time, who work, who pay taxes, who contribute to the economy, and are just simply seeking a better life. So from an operational perspective, there's so much wrong with what's being proposed that it really has state and local law enforcement officials I'm talking to very concerned.
Yeah, and even some, we're hearing reports from within the agency of concerns about that policy and how realistic it actually is. The president saying he actually wants to deport families as well. Even as today we know that the Congress looks like it's going to pass some of this emergency funding that the president's asked for to house these people. But John, before we let you go, I want to ask you about some new numbers that are just coming in from the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse at Syracuse University. This is a think tank up there that actually tracks immigration court cases and some of the claims being made. Our viewers are seeing here on the screen of the 47,000 newly arrived families that were detained at the border and released as of May 2019. About 86% of them showed up at their initial court hearing, according to court documents. 99% of them show up if they actually have a lawyer. That runs totally counter to some of these claims the president's making, that one reason these mass deportations need to happen is that people flee and disappear.
Yeah, this administration for over 2 years has used inaccurate information to support their political immigration and border security agenda. So, the bottom line is this. Objective analysis, objective statistics tell us that those who are here, those who have immigrated here, even those that are here illegally, do not tend to commit crimes. They tend to contribute to the economy. They tend not to be involved in terrorism. And when given the opportunity to come through the immigration process, they do show up for court. Conditions have seriously deteriorated at the southern border. And in large part, that deterioration is a direct result of the policies and efforts of this administration. And the White House put the Department of Homeland Security and law enforcement officials in an untenable position each and every day, because the policies and programs they are proposing not only do not work, and we know that because we can see what's going on at the border, but they also undermine the ability of law enforcement to take meaningful action against dangerous criminals because they divert resources from enforcement efforts that do work.
John Cohen, ABC News contributor, former DHS official. John, thanks for your perspective on that. And Rick, it wasn't just immigration that the president was whipping up the crowd about last night. He was also going hard on his favorite topic, the Mueller probe, the witch hunt, House Democrats' investigations of him. Let's take a listen to that and get your reaction.
After 2 years, 1.4 million pages of documents, 500 search warrants, 500 witnesses, 2,800 subpoenas, and 40 FBI agents working round the clock. What did they come up with? No collusion. And the facts that led our great Attorney General to determine no obstruction. The Democrats don't care about Russia. They only care about their own political power. They went after my family, my business, my finances, my employees, almost everyone that I've ever known or worked with. But they are really going after you. That's what it's all about. It's not about us, it's about you.
So this opening messaging, Rick, is about a presidency under siege. It's a big play to the base, try to fire everybody up. What's less clear to me is that this will have any grab on the middle, the political middle in this country. What's your sense of how this messaging, the I'm under siege, help me, will play to the political middle?
It won't. I'm hard-pressed to find an argument where that works. I mean, look, find me a voter somewhere that voted for Hillary Clinton last time that is now open to voting for Donald Trump. I just don't think that universe exists in a large number. So it's about keeping the base. It's about keeping it on board the people that voted for him last time. This is a base election. I think both sides would probably concede that point, and I think you saw it pretty starkly where the president makes the whole argument about you're trying to take it away from you. You voted for me last time, vote for me again to affirm that and to make sure that they don't take what we've done together away.
And meanwhile, speaking of the taking away, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi continues to walk a very fine line on impeachment because she is very aware of the politics here. You had breakfast with Pelosi this morning with a group of reporters. She's sort of changing her tune a little bit. She says she's now going to read the redacted, minimally redacted Mueller report, which she said she didn't need to do. She says the evidence for impeachment is growing every day. And here's a little bit of what she told you and others about a case for impeachment, which is building.
Every day we see more. So why would we stop with our less strong case? If you're going to go down this path, you got to go down this path. You have to make it so clear. Forgive me if I said this already, but I say it all the time, so I'm not sure where I said it last. Maybe on the phone earlier this morning. If you're going to go down this path, you have to make sure that the public has an understanding of why.
So where do you think the odds are now, even as she inches rhetorically a little bit more towards the impeachment crowd? Do you think that we could be headed towards opening impeachment proceedings?
I don't think so. And
I think she's really going to hold firm.
Yeah, I mean, she also said that she doesn't feel any additional pressure from her members on this. And most of the people who would be no's on this among Democrats are people in marginal districts, the majority makers, the people that hinge either way, also key districts for Trump re-election efforts. So I think she's actually trying to run out the clock, in a sense, that she is banking on the fact that right now, and it is a fact, that they don't have enough votes there to either open an impeachment inquiry or impeach or convict in the Senate.
And she ruled out censure.
She ruled out what
Which
could be a middle
milder middle ground.
Right,
yeah.
and I think the calculation here is that anything short of conviction and removal from office will be held up by President Trump as a victory. He'll call it exoneration. He'll say, look, they tried again and they couldn't get me, and it will only further drive the fervor there. And so instead, they're looking at an election in 16, 17 months, and I think Nancy Pelosi wants to focus the energy and attention there. So yes, she says there's more out there every day, but I think she sort of has to say that. I do not see impeachment happening so long as Nancy Pelosi is in power. All
right, you heard it here. Rick Klein, our political director. Thanks so much for coming in, Rick. Appreciate seeing you. Next to a big question that came up today on Capitol Hill, the one of whether the United States government should pay, formally compensate, descendants of slaves in Jim Crow in this country, give reparations to those descendants. It was the first time in more than a decade a hearing on the topic was held on Capitol Hill. Here's a little bit of the debate.
While emancipation dead-bolted the door against the bandits of America, Jim Crow wedged the windows wide open. And that is the thing about Senator McConnell's something. It was 150 years ago, and it was right now.
This hearing is yet another important step in the long and heroic struggle of African Americans to secure reparations for the damages inflicted by enslavement.
H.R. 40 calls for the establishment of a commission. It does not call for checks. We trivialize reparations by saying that these are just African Americans that want to be paid.
I say that I am brokenhearted and angry right now. Decades of living in a community where you see how deeply unfair this nation is still to so many people.
Too many individuals, too many communities have been disadvantaged due to their family's history of arriving to this land or due to the color of their skin and their economic status. Too many families, including my own, have suffered for decades due to mass incarceration, the manifestation of modern-day slavery.
A little bit of star power on the reparations fight there. Let's bring in now ABC's Matthew Vann from Capitol Hill, who was covering the hearing today. Matthew, thanks for joining us. So give us a sense of what advocates for reparations are actually asking Congress to do here.
Well, Devin, this hearing just wrapped up a couple of hours ago, but what we did see today was momentum for a bill that Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas proposed, which would expand the look into reparations and look at issues of slavery and the legacy of Jim Crow in this country. Now, at the moment, that bill has about 50 co-sponsors, and you know as well as I do that there needs to be a lot more momentum on such a bill to even bring that to the full House floor for a vote amidst all the opponents and critics that have already risen up against this so far.
Yeah, there's even been a pretty healthy debate within the Democratic Party on reparations and far from a consensus about how to move forward. So we'll see where that heads. Let's bring in now a different perspective on all this. Hannah Michael joins us. She's one of the Georgetown University students who was behind that campaign a little bit earlier this year to get the campus there, the students to pay more tuition to create a reparations fund for those descendants of the 272 slaves that helped build Georgetown. Hannah, thanks for joining us. How important is it for you to see the U.S. Congress take actions on reparations?
I think it's very important, and I think that it's absolutely necessary for there to be institutional redress and institutional acknowledgement of the debate that's going on about reparations. And I definitely think there's a need to investigate further into what specifically reparations would look like and how to move forward with restorative justice within the framework of reparations.
One of the witnesses today at the hearing, an African-American picked by the Republicans to attend, said that reparations would be, quote, an insult to Black Americans by putting a price on the sacrifice of slavery. Do you think it would be an insult in any way?
The way that I've thought through this topic is more of reparations as repayment of a debt. It's not meant to assume or to say that the amount that is devoted to reparational work is in any way supposed to make up for the horrors of slavery. It absolutely won't, and there's no fiscal amount that ever could. But I definitely think that a financial commitment is necessary in any restorative justice work that's done around the topic of reparations, because financial commitment really enables actual work to be done in communities that would need resources.
And Matthew, this idea of a financial commitment as well as the symbolism were both sort of agreed upon really out of this hearing by advocates, but there were some opponents who said both of those things, both the symbolism of an apology and the financial component, are unnecessary, they're unreasonable. Here's a little bit of what Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell had to say about that.
Yeah, I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago for whom none of us currently living are responsible is a good idea. We've tried to deal with our original sin of slavery by fighting a civil war, by passing landmark civil rights legislation. We've elected an African-American president. No one currently alive was responsible for that. And I don't think we should be trying to figure out how to compensate for it. First of all, it'd be pretty hard to figure out who to compensate.
Matthew, those comments by McConnell really intensified the debate today.
Absolutely. And adding on to those comments from McConnell today were Senators Lindsey Graham and John Kennedy, who say that it's nearly impossible to allocate monetary reparations to the countless descendants of African Americans who were descendants of slaves. So the opponents and all the criticism surely is mounting, and it has been for quite some time now.
Yeah, and Hannah, we heard today at this fascinating conversation at this hearing about the awkwardness. Some of the witnesses brought up the awkwardness and discomfort that white Americans feel when the topic of reparations come up. You had so many conversations with your white classmates about this topic. I know we caught up earlier this year on campus. What were those conversations like? What did you learn in having conversations about reparations with your white peers?
Well, I've learned that everyone has the capacity to practice empathy, and everyone has the capacity to act on that ability to practice empathy. In the context of the student activism that I was involved in, I recognized that once students were thoroughly informed and given the freedom and creative license to think about what reparations means and what it means in the context of their own familial history. I think that's really where people made the most progress, because they realized, wow, I am connected to this history and this legacy regardless of whether or not I recognize it, and there actually is a way for me to move forward. So I think really allowing people the opportunity to educate themselves and giving them the resources necessary, and also displaying different ways that people can act on the information they receive from those resources really is the best way to move forward in informing people.
Yeah, more information, more facts, more empathy, I think could do all of us some good. Hannah Michael from Georgetown University, thank you so much. And our thanks again to Matthew Vann for his reporting from Capitol Hill. Well, finally today, a new report from the United Nations is revealing the staggering impact of global war, persecution, and conflict. A record 70 million people were forced to flee their homes all around the world in 2018, becoming refugees. It's the largest number ever recorded by the United Nations, from Syria to Venezuela. The flows of asylum seekers, even here in the United States, have reached record levels. As this is Refugee Week here in the United States, and our Mona Kosar Abdi is out at Maidan restaurant here in Washington, D.C., where a number of chefs in this city are trying to reach out to those families and those refugees and do them some good. Hey, Mona.
Hey, Devin, that's right. I'm inside Maidan restaurant right now. It's one of the 5 D.C. restaurants taking part in a lunch series put on by the nonprofit Tables Without Borders. This week is really all about showcasing the culinary talents of refugees and asylum seekers and proving that cooking is universal, even if each meal is not.
At the smoldering center of the American melting pot stands D.C.'s Maidan restaurant.
Very welcoming, and the name Maidan means like a central square. And I think this idea of having this giant thing in the middle for people to kind of gather around is very on point with what we're trying to convey.
Where on any given night, diners can experience the flavors of the Middle East and North Africa.
Through a lot of talking, we kind of stumbled on this idea of cooking food sort of from Morocco to Iran and kind of all the countries in between.
But this week, executive chef Gerald Addison is making room in front of the fire for guest chef Najat Ahmadollah.
I want to present the Afghan real authentic food.
The Afghan refugee taking Maidan further down the Silk Road by showcasing authentic cuisines from his native home.
This Afghan food is very popular food all the world, especially in rice and kebabs.
The collaboration, almost a year in the making, is the brainchild of Sam Sagroy and Sarah Abdulrahim.
The concept came actually over a dinner table with my co-founder, Sarah.
The two founding Tables Without Borders to pair up asylum seekers and refugees experienced in the culinary arts with 5 of D.C.'s most popular restaurants.
With restaurants of this caliber, it's really awesome to have those, few days in the kitchen learning from the head chefs about how it works.
Back before the open flame, Chef Najat describes cooking as his first love.
Since of teenager, I was started cooking. I learned it because my favorites skills to cook all the time, and I need to know all about the cooks, how to cook the foods.
He already had several years of professional experience under his belt when he, his wife, and 2 children were resettled in the U.S.
It is challenging. For the first time we are here, we don't know about nothing. So slowly we adapted. We know about the culture, we know about the society, we know about everything.
The opportunity, he says, allows him to share a piece of home with his new neighbors.
Cultural exchange. Beautiful.
While Chef Gerald says Tables Without Borders complements the restaurant's mission of breaking down cultural barriers using the power of a shared meal.
My dream is in the future I want to make a restaurant, very special restaurant, especially authentic Afghan foods. The taste is real different from every restaurant and everywhere.
Now, this program goes until Friday. If you were hoping to catch Chef Najat in action, I'm sorry to say that this event is fully booked. But Devin, don't worry. Tables Without Borders says they plan on bringing the concept back.
It's a really neat concept. It's great to hear those personal stories and actually see the food connection. I'm a foodie, so looks good. I got to get over there to Maidan. It looks like a great place. And Mona Kosar Abdi, thank you so much for that and shining a spotlight on the importance of refugees and those families on this World Refugee Week. Thanks to her. Should also say, just as a footnote, the United Nations says in this new report that 4 in 5 refugees are displaced for at least 5 years, and the greatest number of refugees in this past year came from Venezuela, which of course we've been covering the crisis down there here on the show. Thanks for joining us on this very busy Wednesday here in the briefing room. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. We're here every day at 3:30 Eastern Time. You can follow us on the ABC News app, as well as on Hulu, Roku, Apple TV, and everywhere else you can find ABC News and ABC News Live. Hope to see you back here tomorrow.